My name is Manfred von Vior. I'm the General Sales Manager at McLaren Beverly Hills, and this is one of the most radical cars that has ever been here in our showroom. It is the McLaren P1 GTR. And to tell us more about the car, I'll introduce you to Peter and Dean.
Folks, welcome back. My name is Peter Chiapponi of McLaren Beverly Hills, and we have a real treat today. If you like cars, and you surely do, or you wouldn't be watching this channel. We had the distinct pleasure of delivering a McLaren P1 GTR a little while ago. The car is simply sensational, and to top it off, we have the man that built it, and that man is Dean Lanzante of Lanzante Motorsports. Dean is a very, very well-known figure in the supercar world, and for good reason. His company built the car, the 1995 McLaren F1 GTR LM that won Le Mans on its debut. We just had the great, sensational pleasure to hand the keys over to a customer that you work with for many months, and you handed them the keys to his customized McLaren P1 GTR. And that was fantastic for everyone. I can see the passion and the pleasure that you enjoyed giving this man his car. The car is absolutely beyond. I can't even believe it. And I'm just really interested to know what brought us to this place in the road where we're handing the keys over to a car like that.
Well, Lanzante's involvement with McLaren started with the F1. At the time, we were doing GT racing, which is what the category that the F1 was competing in.
Yeah.
And we were asked very last minute. At the time, my father was running the company, and we were asked very last minute to run an F1 at Le Mans. So we hadn't even run an F1 in a race at all. It was straight to Le Mans. Obviously, history is pretty self-explanatory. The car went on to win Le Mans.
Sure.
And for us, I think it maybe been arranged so quickly that maybe we didn't know what was happening in front of us at the time.
Didn't have time to be scared.
Exactly. I think it just happened, and probably only a year after that we looked back on it, we thought, oh my God, that was actually quite an achievement.
Outstanding.
Quite an amazing thing. And then from then, obviously the F1 came out in quite troubled economic times, so sales weren't that affluent of the car. The F1 was hugely successful in racing, and as with most race cars, they have their period when they're very competitive or have a purpose, and then they drop out of purpose.
Right, you are.
And the F1 GTR became of no use to anybody. A client of ours, Ray Belm, who actually between himself and Ron Dennis started the whole F1 GTR program. He had an F1 GTR, he had nothing to race it in, and it was like, well, what do we do with this thing? And we decided to put it on the road. And it became effectively a car with race history that was equal to the F1 LM.
Yeah.
So that was how that was our first step into road registering a track car.
Interesting.
And then from then, as the car's values go up, more collectors get involved with them. And just because you can afford to collect one of these cars doesn't mean you necessarily want to be committed to only use it on track. So there's quite a market in using this car on the road.
Well said.
So then, we fast forward, we go 20 years on, McLaren bring out P1 GTR, and the same thing happened, but maybe a little bit sooner, where people looked at this car and said, I love this car, it's an amazing machine, but actually I don't either have the time to commit to doing a track program with it, or maybe I just want to enjoy it on occasional circumstances on the road.
Yeah.
And then McLaren contacted us to see whether we'd actually be willing to put this thing on the road. We had a history of doing it with other vehicles, and we kind of took a bit of a leap and thought, we'll see. And then we're nearly 50% of production numbers have now been put on the road. We have 4 in the USA, of which one was just an hour ago exactly. And it's been a really exciting project to be involved with, and it's we never would have thought 20 years ago doing Le Mans that it would have led to this.
Sure.
But that's how we have an involvement and maybe a purpose with McLaren to do it. And then together with McLaren's very much a brand of personalisation.
Yeah, for sure.
and a lot of high-end customers, whether it's with their clothing, whether it's with their homes, whatever they consume, the latest thing seems to be about having something bespoke, and it's something I know you guys at the dealership deal with on a regular basis with all street cars. And this particular customer with the P1 GTR took it to quite a level of personalization.
Indeed, he did, a level to which our fans around the world will enjoy. And I'm sure the result will be very, very pleasing to everyone that likes McLaren. The car is sensational, maybe the nicest I've ever seen, but the world will be the judge of that shortly. What do you think it is about McLaren, maybe the F1, its DNA, that gets people so wildly passionate about a car?
With the F1, obviously now it's not just obviously it's achievements even in its day. It's the first car to really break those sort of speeds. F40 had just broken 200 miles an hour, and then you have a car going to do 240 miles an hour. And it took many years until the Veyron came along. It took over a decade for another car to even beat that. So I think its achievement of build quality, it's a carbon chassis, which now we don't even think much about, but at the time it was
revolutionary.
It was unbelievable. This was stuff that was, only a decade old in Formula One, and now all of a sudden it's on a street car. And I think it goes without saying, probably the most recognisable thing to most people watching this on an F1 is its seating position.
No doubt.
A central seating position, that's just not the norm. You're about to see it repeated in the future with McLaren. Obviously, that's quite an exciting new project they're doing with 3 seats. But I think with the F1, it was build quality all the way through. It was one man, Gordon Murray's vision of a road car that was such a huge step. And now followed through into McLaren, you have such a racing pedigree that's put through.
50 years.
Maybe in the US, not as well known, but the McLaren have, they started with Can-Am, which was, all through the US. And then they've won Indianapolis.
Indeed they did.
And then everything sort of merged over more to Formula One. So in more current times, it's been their successes in Formula One.
Right.
Obviously 3 of their world championships being won by possibly the world's most famous racing driver in Ayrton Senna. So I think all of these things together, and now McLaren have got products that so many consumers can have. The F1 was a very high-end, hugely expensive vehicle.
Right.
As now, your showroom, you have a range of vehicles for all price ranges, all performance ranges, practicalities and everything. And I think McLaren have sort of gone for performance, build quality, but in a very unique way, in a different way approach to all of its rivals.
You're very observant in that regard, because here we are in the showroom with cars in the $200,000 range that are the offspring, so to speak, of the progenitor. And you've closed the loop on that beautifully. The F1 is iconic, and most people think it's the most spectacular analog car, so to speak.
Absolutely.
That's what they call it, right?
Yeah.
And then we move into cars like the P1 or the P1 GTR or the P1 GTR LM. And then you've got a car in the showroom that's $199,000 with a carbon chassis. They can hop in that car. Our quote-unquote junior car is 562 horsepower, 443 foot-pounds of torque, goes 204 miles an hour. Car and driver likes to think our car goes 0 to 60 in 2.7. We won't fight them. These are sensational numbers that rival the iconic cars from the racing days.
And when you look at an F1 now, and this is a $15 million car,
Right, you are.
and you can buy a $200,000 car in a showroom, other than the top speed, the other performance figures are matched.
Yes.
I mean, that is progress, that's how we move forward, but it is impressive that these things are now so reachable to so many consumers.
This client today, if you want to talk about it, because it's fresh in your mind, and I think you just very much enjoyed that handover delivery. This client today, give us a sense of the dialogue that you had, because the result, as our viewers will see, is beyond.
The customer wanted a McLaren P1 GTR, and we had a car available to him. It was brand new, but it was built, so it couldn't be built from the factory in his exact spec. So we have a white car, and this particular customer has Ferraris as other brand of cars as well. And he kind of said orange was his big thing. He said, I kind of see McLaren, their historic colours, which has now been echoed in the new Formula One car. And we then set to work, along with McLaren and MSO's involvement as well, with renditions of different paint schemes. And this went back and forth. It's quite an involving process. You can get out of it as a consumer as much as you want to put in. And you know, that would be my advice to anybody buying one of these things, is to get involved, because the rewards are so great if you're willing to do so. And this particular consumer he made the absolute most of it. And we sent, from the UK, we sent paint samples and carbon samples, trim samples, back and forth, until we came up with one of a better word, like a palette of materials and colours.
Yep.
And we had a rendition at that point, and then we put it actually to the car. And even as it goes through those phases, the customer gets pictures through those stages of how things are going, because it's like with anything, you make little tweaks along the way, but this stayed pretty much on the same road that we set out on. And it is very rewarding in my position to go from that early phase, a blank canvas, where the consumer has a vision and you put that into the real world.
Yeah.
And then when we stand there face to face, and you know, I travel out here and
Sure.
see you guys, and we, you know, between us all working together with this customer, supplying a car, doing the specification that he required, and when we all stand together and this customer's happy with what he's receiving,
Sure.
it's
rewarding, right?
yeah, it is very much so.
What do you find that these people have in common, that they're sitting in front of you in your office prepared to spend many millions to get a masterpiece? Is it the love of the car?
It can be many things, actually. Many of them have other supercars or hypercars, as we call them today, as well. And to be honest, to most people, the separation between them all is pretty slim. There's a lot of great cars out there. I think the build of it is one thing. Is McLaren is its technology is very advanced. They are pushing the envelope constantly on new technologies, and that does benefit the performance of their cars. Probably gives them an edge over their rivals in that area. Together with being able to personalize a car so much, you know, this is pretty rare with other brands that you can get that involved. And I know you guys have done many creations from here, and then coupled together with MSO in the UK. And I think it's all of those things together. There is the racing, obviously, as part of it, is that what you're buying into. It's also quite a unique car. You know, they're looking to build up 4,000 cars this year globally.
Max, yeah.
So you're not buying something that everybody else has got. You've got something quite unique. P1 GTRs in very low numbers. There's under 60 cars built globally. You sort of share those about. Your chances of bumping into somebody else with one are pretty slim.
Yes, that's true. How do you think these cars are going to hold up? Do you think there's a day in the future where someone's going to hand over $20 million for P1 GTR, or that might be optimistic?
We mustn't forget why the McLaren F1 has particularly become so valuable. It's the last GT car to ever have won Le Mans. And unless regulations change massively for Le Mans, that will remain.
Awesome.
So its achievement in motorsport has also been a contributing factor to why it's a collectible car. There's also very low numbers built. Obviously, we have more people in the world, we have more wealth in the world, so even though the volumes of these new hypercars like P1, 375 units, that's still pretty low when you spread it around. For the future values of a P1 or a 675 LT or something like that, because they're pretty low numbers too.
That's right.
A lot will depend on what comes out in the future and how we acknowledge the time we're in now.
Oh, well said.
Because we may be looking at, I know a lot of people are nervous about hybrid technology in particular on the hypercars, but we may be looking back at this period and saying this was the first time of these sort of hybrid performance cars. It may be a line in the sand where all of this stuff, we might be sitting here in 20 years time where you wouldn't dream of building a hypercar unless it's got some form of hybrid power.
Interesting.
And then we might all appreciate this starting point that we stand in now. It's very difficult to tell how it'll be looked upon. I know people are nervous about maintenance, serviceability of this sort of technology. I believe that brands as big as McLaren, Porsche, Ferrari, they're not going to let these cars just mothball. They'll keep up with technology. I already know the McLaren have got battery technology now that's half the weight, half the size of packaging, 4 years down the line from P1 being first launched, that can deliver the same performance. That's just progress.
Right.
But that will be, I'm sure, in the future, when 10 years time, when you need a new battery in your P1, McLaren will have an alternative. It will probably have a performance advantage, and it will keep that car running. So it will be interesting to see how this period is perceived. But we've got quite a few cars now in 1,000 horsepower or thereabouts bracket, which
outlandish.
Yeah, I mean, that's just gone crazy.
I watched one of your cars assault Lord March's driveway during the Goodwood Festival of Speed, which was quite impressive. A new record, if I'm not mistaken.
For a road car, yes, and I think it's the 11th fastest time ever up that hill.
Not bad.
And that's against Formula One cars and everything, and this is a street car. So that's the progress that we're dealing with now, is that people are constantly pushing this envelope of performance. And I think consumers, it's not that they feel, many people might be looking at this and going, why do we need 1,000 horsepower? Why do we need cars that do over 200 miles an hour? But I think it's just an intrigue of the technology. I don't think people necessarily all want to have to use it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just knowing that it's as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And I think there's an intrigue with that. No different to buying a piece of clothing. You can buy a suit for 10 times the price of one to another, but if there's something that's gone into that material, or something that's gone into the craftsmanship, or something, there's an appreciation for it. And I think it can be the same with these cars.
I agree with you. And you alluded to a snapshot of what a likely future might look like. It's interesting to me that somebody could drive a 427 Cobra and have a fantastic experience in a car that's entirely elemental as any car could be. And then they might have the same type of scintillating experience in a P1 GTR. It's fascinating. Couldn't be more different, but yet they deliver the same sensations to the driver. How do we keep the driver excited about the car when the car becomes less like a car that we know?
When you look at an F1, it has no airbags. It's
Right.
1,050 kilograms. And then people say, well, how come a P1 is 250 kilograms heavier? And it's like, well, actually it has airbags and it has to have certain safety. There's a lot.
Sure.
And we're constantly almost being pegged back as fast as we can make progressions too. In California, I know you have very strict emissions laws, and so you're having to fight even harder. 1,000 horsepower now is incredible when you think, and we're having catalytic converters and emissions and all the things that we have to comply to as well. So I think a lot of the progression is in performance is maybe taken away in the interest of our safety as well. So I think moving forward, materials will probably
I would
be
agree.
the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Safety being done through the use of composite materials, particularly carbon fiber, because then you have the benefit of having lightweight. Lightweight gives you more performance, as well as give you other benefits, fuel efficiency. So even in lower models of cars, more mainstream cars, if this follows through, you'll gain all the other benefits along with it, as well as just outright speed and performance.
Not to mention 1981, when John Watson strapped himself into essentially a carbon fiber fuselage, and then went on later in the year to crash it, and then went home to his wife that night. And I think that ushered in appreciation for carbon fiber and the technology that McLaren pioneered for cars and still enjoys today. Neither one of us knows where this is all going to go. I'll just leave it to you for a final thought.
Well, I think McLaren are doing a great job themselves to help people like both of us in our situation out. They're building fantastic cars, enjoyable cars, and maybe I think their approach of just sticking into cars that are for enjoyment, as well as their practicalities. They're not building SUVs, they're not building pickups or anything like that. They're sticking to what they know, and I think there's a really bright future with that. I think they're going to supply many exciting cars for all consumers for the future. It's exciting times.
Well, maybe we'll both be there to enjoy those times together.
So.
Dean, thank you again. Thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to
Okay,
have you here. The customer was so delighted with your work, and we're so happy to have you here talking about cars, McLaren, technology, and the work that you do. It's just fantastic to have one of the true icons of the business here with us today. So folks, thank you so much for your precious time. We appreciate you looking at what we do, looking at what Dean does, and of course, if you want to contact Dean, we can make that happen. Reach out to us here at McLaren Beverly Hills.